Welcome to this special edition of 7:30 NT, coming to you from Alice Springs. I'm Louisa Rebgetz. The town of Alice Springs is often associated with excessive crime and violence. But it was last week's alleged rape of 2 foreign tourists that sparked action from the top. During his visit to Alice Springs this week, the Police Commissioner called for an interagency approach to lowering what he calls unacceptable high levels of violence and crime in the town. He says it's not a police issue, rather it's one of fixing social dysfunction. It's a weeknight at a town camp in Alice Springs and a violent incident has taken place. Dealing with an event like this is a common occurrence for police in this town. But tonight, the Northern Territory's top cop, Police Commissioner John McRoberts, is out on the beat in Alice Springs.
It was confronting. This is what my men and women do day in, day out, almost every day of the week. We saw a man who presented as being violently assaulted, blood pouring from his head, and that's just totally unacceptable. Once again, alcohol was a significant contributing factor.
An ambulance and paramedics arrive at the scene.
You keep talking to us, all right?
Yeah, just stay there, stay there. Have you got anything sharp on you?
2 men are taken to the Alice Springs watch house.
All right, just step back and we're going to open the back of the vehicle for you and jump in, eh?
There's a knife involved. We obviously take that very seriously. We've had an injured male. He's been conveyed to hospital in the ambulance. And as a matter of just a course of inquiry, we actually effected 2 arrests.
Commissioner McRoberts has come to see firsthand the crime and violence that's plaguing Alice Springs. He says the problems facing the town aren't new.
There has been social dysfunction in Alice Springs for well over 30 years. This is not a new or emerging issue. This is a situation that has flourished for many years. I have heard loud and clear the message from the citizens of Alice Springs that they're fed up with the situation in the town.
I mean, people are living in fear. The level of property crime is so high that we've got mums and women who are sleeping with handbags under their pillows and blokes who've got baseball bats by the sides of their beds in case they get broken into while they're asleep at night.
Yeah, Roger, the Jazz supervisor will sort all that out for me, thanks.
The Territory is a violent place. People who live here are more likely than other Australians to be the victim of an assault.
Can you tell me your name, please?
Senior police in Alice Springs say overall they don't believe crime in the town has been on the rise, but they do acknowledge there's been a recent spike of break and enters.
We do see crime dependent upon population, and when we see a number of visitors come to town, we see an increase in antisocial behaviour and criminal activities such as unlawful entries and domestic violence.
A violent sexual assault last week brought the situation to a head. 2 European tourists who'd been sleeping in their car were allegedly raped at gunpoint in an Alice Springs side street. It spurred the Territory government into action.
Today I have tasked the Police Commissioner to personally take charge of this operation. I'm serving notice on people whose only reason for being in Alice Springs is drinking and troublemaking. You are on notice.
The Police Commissioner came to Alice Springs to unveil a plan of action to deal with crime. And he doesn't believe more police officers are necessarily the answer.
Police alone cannot nor ever will solve all the social ills that might face any town anywhere in Australia. What we have to do is work very closely with the community as a whole and more specifically with government agencies, non-government organisations that deliver a suite of services that particularly target social dysfunction.
It's been really hard, actually. Really hard. I'm not sure I want to stay here.
Any new intervention by police in Alice Springs may come too late for Meredith Elliott and her family. Their home was broken into last month.
Can't even talk about it without bursting into tears. I then slammed the door shut I threw all my body weight, I crouched down here, and then I just saw the shadow of a person walking past and going up the hall. Not even 6 months ago, we were trying to buy a business here in town. Now, we really don't want to be a part of it. It's not healthy to not want to walk outside your front door.
This one was damaged at the Gilling Club on Saturday night, rock throwers in the car park.
One business at least is benefiting from the problems in the town. Long-term Alice Springs family business, Trusty Glass, is flat out.
Especially the last 6 weeks has been particularly high vandalism, which is literally just rocks at cars or just smash and grab break-ins, I guess, and cars getting damaged, and it's normally at least 5 or 10 in one night, and they all seem to be from the same areas, so it's just pure vandalism at the moment.
This is the worst I've ever seen, and as I door knock and I talk to my constituents, they tell me it's the worst that they've ever seen. Hello, how are you?
Oh, hi.
Adam Giles, member for Breitling.
Local Country Liberals member Adam Giles is calling first and foremost for more police on the streets.
If there were enough police resources and people were working together well, we wouldn't have hundreds of kids, hundreds of minors running around the streets at night. We wouldn't have drunks terrorising people on our streets.
Last month, fear and anger in the town spilled over onto the pages of Facebook.
There's a responsibility here not to do that sort of stuff, not to say they're going to kill someone or call for vigilante action or, you know, there's some way we've got to control these blacks. And again, they're the comments that I've seen on these Facebook sites.
There's always been a racial divide within Alice Springs. I guess what we need to look at is whether or not this whole of government approach is going to deal or tackle these problems.
Tungunjira Council, which manages the town camps in Alice Springs, says the drift of Aboriginal people from remote communities into town is a major factor.
I think it has become a pressure cooker over the course of the last 2 years with the increase in the exacerbation of the urban drift from remote community members.
At Whitegate Town Camp on the edge of town, these women say they want some respite.
When they come in for a football carnival or something, they come into town and there's a lot of people there and there's a lot of grog and fighting and all that.
More than 800 women are expected to seek a bed at the Alice Springs Women's Shelter during the year. Most are Indigenous and wanting protection from domestic violence.
95% of our clients are Indigenous, and we know they're experiencing disproportionate levels of violence compared to the rest of the community in Australia.
So if you can ring the police and see if they can help.
The women we see on any assessment that you would use are at high risk of ongoing violence and high risk of domestic violence homicide.
We've had data for a long time that shows an Aboriginal woman in Alice Springs is 24 times more likely to be assaulted than a non-Aboriginal woman. We've known that for a long time. The homicides and the manslaughters that are going on in this community are largely black on black, Aboriginal people on Aboriginal people. We don't get police commissioners coming down when all that's happening. Now this is a tragic event, there's no doubt about it. It really is, and it should be responded to, but so should what's been happening in this community for many, many years.
Dr John Boffa works at Congress, an Aboriginal medical service. He's campaigning for the government to put a minimum price on alcohol in order to decrease consumption.
If you removed alcohol tomorrow so that people weren't drunk, you would probably cut by 50% the amount of violent crime, particularly interpersonal violence.
Alcohol prohibition has not stemmed the flow of alcohol. Personally, I think that the issues stemming from alcohol has increased. There's an increase in alcohol-related harm.
You're sick, man!
Oh, do you have
to? Like, seriously?
Only last night, police were called to a motel in town where the ABC crew was staying after reports that a man was yelling to female tourists and attempting to enter their room. He allegedly punched an officer and was charged with assault. The Police Commissioner has said he wants to see some quick wins in Alice Springs, but believes long-term sustainable change is more important.
The future of Alice Springs lies in all of our hands. If we don't do anything about it, if we don't give this a go, I suspect that in 12 months' time we'll be saying the same thing as they were 30 years ago, and I don't think that's good enough.